Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Hey, stay till the end today, okay? Till I dismiss you.
All right.
We missed you at the very end yesterday.
Oh, all right.
All right, here we go. Good afternoon. Happy unofficial Friday, right? Because we're not going to see each other tomorrow. Don't you miss? No, I miss Bob Dylan Friday. We haven't had a Bob Dylan Friday in what feels like a century.
Thursday now.
I could inflict some Bob Dylan on you today. That might happen. So today, a lot of things are going to happen. So let me jump to that. First, it would be nice if I unfroze the screen. First thing we're going to do after I go through this list of things, we are going to make some slip today, and that's why we made fortune cookies. So people who are at home, you're going to be using your fortune cookies to make slip. People who are here, you're going to be cracking open some fortune cookies and reading the fortunes and then using them to make the slip, and I'll talk more about that in a second. A little bit of new vocabulary today, so that's why you need your notebook out. There's a demo on some carving techniques because it is a requirement for this project that you do some carving into your tiles on both sides. So as it hangs in the breeze, theoretically, if you were to fire it, it does need a design that's carved on both sides. So I'll talk about some ways to do that. And then it's work time for the rest of the hour. And it's such a nice day. I've set out a table outside. So if you want to go bring your stool outside and work outside today, that would be a lovely idea. People who are at home, I encourage you, go work outside today. It's beautiful. Okay. Also today, the lock-in drill does not apply to you because that already happened. Tomorrow is MCA testing for 10th and 11th graders. And I was racking my brain to come up with an assignment that could just be for the 9th and the 12th graders who are at home tomorrow not doing the MCA. And I couldn't think of an assignment that I just wanted half my class to do. If I do an assignment, I want everybody to do it. So I decided to not have an assignment for tomorrow, right? Are we okay with that? I figured you might be. What I do have to do, because I don't want to get fired, is I do have to have an attendance question. So there will be attendance for only 9th and 12th graders who are home tomorrow. If you're MCA, if you're a 10th or 11th grader, you don't have to do anything for my class tomorrow. You won't be marked absent. You're marked excused, okay? So only 9th and 12th graders, you will have an attendance question for 3rd hour. That is it, okay? People at home, it's a day for you to catch up if you're behind. Do your extra work, get it turned in. Monday is the day that your tile project is going to be due. You guys have more time than my other ceramics B class. My other class is 1st hour. They are not as far as you are. So I feel like with your class, I'm going to see how far things get today and how detailed you get with your carving. But maybe the tile project will be due maybe halfway through class on Monday, and then I'll introduce the new project. We'll see. We'll see how much time you need to be able to finish this. But we're definitely going to be moving on by Tuesday of next week to the new project, which is the plan. So that's our timeline. Any questions on that stuff? People at home, if you have a question, unmute and pipe in. All right. If there aren't any questions, please turn to the next clean page in your notebook or write it on the same page that you did your notes yesterday. It's really up to you. And jot down these 3 new terms. Hey, Quincy. 3 short little terms for today. So term number 1 is slake. Slaking is what we're about to be doing with our fortune cookies to make our slip. So if you remember back to ceramics A, and I talked about plasticity and how clay is made up of platelets like this, right? And when the platelets don't have any water between them, when they're totally dry, like these fortune cookies are totally dry right now, if we were to submerge that in water, that dry clay in water, the water molecules will try to rip apart the clay platelets. And in fact, that's what they'll do right before your very eyes. You're going to see the clay rip apart the clay platelets. And you're going to see those little platelets float down to the bottom of your container like snow. So you're going to actually literally see a ceramic platelet. And we're going to let them slake and kind of melt down in that water for about maybe 20 minutes. Actually, we don't even need our slip today. We're going to make it today, and then it's just going to like percolate over the weekend. But we're going to let it slake down, and we're going to put the lid on it. We're going to give it a little shake to mix it up, and then we're just going to put it in your locker for today, because most people won't need slip today. Some of you might, and I'll explain that in the demo. But slaking is that scientific process. It's science happening right before your very eyes, and it's really satisfying to watch. So we'll be doing that in a little bit. Additive sculpting is something you're going to learn about today. It's when you're making a relief sculpture or a relief tile. You want certain areas to pop out more than other areas. So you can literally just add more clay to those areas that you want to pop out. You would score and slip and add those extra layers. Like, for example, on the puppies that I'm making for my tiles, maybe I want the tail to pop out more. So I could add a little extra clay in that tail area so the tail pops out more. Or the ear, maybe I want the ear to pop out more. So I can add extra clay to build out those layers and make it more 3D. The other type of carving or sculpting you're going to do today is subtractive, where you're carving the clay away. And my guess is that most of us are going to do the subtractive technique, where you're carving away layers of clay to make it seem more three-dimensional. So I'll talk about that in the demo today too. So those are our 3 terms for today. So let's take a minute, like 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes here, and make our slip first. So we can just kind of let that slake while we are working. So what I want you to do, people who are here and people who are at home, you can do this too. Choose 3 fortune cookies. They're not yours. I purposely switched them around to different tables. Break them open, read your little fortune that's inside, and then smile and feel good because you hopefully read a nice fortune. Hopefully nobody left anything naughty on these fortunes. People at home, break your fortune cookies open, and then everybody, you're going to put your broken pieces into your slip container. And you're going to fill that slip container half full with warm water. Some of these fortune cookies are pretty chunky and pretty difficult to open. There's definitely more than enough at this table. So you have your 3 already? Yeah. You obliterated that cookie. Is the same thing happening in your hour that happened in first hour? Are all the fortunes ripping in half? Yeah. Well, hopefully you can still read your fortune. If you're mixed, it doesn't go true? I'm sorry. Unless it's a bad fortune and then that's good. Okay. Once you've cracked open your cookies, put all the clay pieces in your plastic container. That's a very specific portion. I know. It really could only be used in this class. You can keep your little fortunes if you wish. You can toss your fortunes if you wish. It was meant just to be fun. Hopefully something that makes it fun. Then fill your container about half full so that the tiles are mostly covered with warm water. And then once the warm water is in there, don't do anything else to it. Just let it sit there undisturbed at the table. And over time, You're gonna peek in there and you're gonna see those little plate places getting.
Freaking moonlight. Oh, there we go.
There you go. Get a good one?
It's never green.
Oh, that's scary. That's O N and that's U N. Interesting way to figure out fraternity. Can we like anybody get a really funny fortune?
I told me to quit my job.
That, like, in the right circumstances, could be good or terrible advice. All right, put all your little broken bits in your container.
Good friends of my
Oh. Fill your container with warm water until the tiles are mostly covered. And then come on back to your seat. People who are at home, you might choose to do this later once you start working, and that's fine. If you're doing it now, that's fine too. But stick around because we got a demo coming up.
We got that something after.
You can if you want, but it's kind of fun to watch the process happen. So if you just leave it to the side at your table, plus you might need slip if you do the additive method. Where am I done right now? Over here. All right. So once your slip is set and ready to go, I'm going to ask you to come over to table 6 for today's demo. It's going to be small. I'm working small today on carving, and so it is to your advantage to get as close as you can while still socially distancing. All right, so your slaking that's happening in your slip container, it's not an instantaneous process. It's actually way more entertaining to watch it as a time lapse. But yeah, it's happening already, isn't it? So just kind of peek in there every now and again, and you'll see the process taking shape. Science before your very eyes. All right, so today I'm going to talk about the different ways that you could work on carving your tiles, because remember, these should be something that's above and beyond anything you would have done in Ceramics A. So I would kind of like it to be more than just needle tool drawings, all right? Something that's a little bit more sophisticated, more carving to it. So I have the steps up on the screen, and I'll leave them up on the screen. People who are at home, you'll have that in the video that I've posted already. So I'm just going to go through those steps. So if you haven't finished cutting all your tiles, obviously do that first. I think everybody in here got far enough where you cut all your tiles yesterday. Then if you haven't done it yet, smooth. There are little sponges in the green bucket in the back by the back sink. People at home, you have small sponges too. Smooth all your edges on all of them and just give them a little pinch. That way they're not so slabby. They're not such a kind of sharp rectangular edge. So just give them a little gentle pinch just to soften those edges. You can also take a ribbon tool. People here, you have ribbon tools over there. People at home, you also have ribbon tools. And you can do a little bit of gentle carving on that edge too, just to soften that edge. I want to see, that's one of the things I'm grading you on, is that your edges aren't super slabby. Next, if you haven't done it already, you can use a needle tool or a toothpick to draw out your designs or your interior lines. They might be one-dimensional, and I mentioned this yesterday that they were kind of, you could do a really shallow relief or a really deep relief. So this was a tile that I made just for the purposes of this demo. That's the Aquarius symbol. And I first drew it with a needle tool just to kind of map it out. But then I took a dull pencil and I redrew the lines with a dull pencil, which thickened them, which gives them more emphasis. So, so if you're going to do, you know, a lot of carving of line work, a dull pencil actually works really well to make those lines a little bit thicker. But then it was kind of boring, like just to do those lines. So I also did, this is going to be hard to see from far away, but I also did a little texture around it too. So now for the sake of continuity, I also have to do the same design the same way on the back side. So I want to make sure, like if it's level on this side, I need to make sure it's level on this side too. And one way to make sure that things are level, like the same, going the same direction on both sides, is to get your holes in your tiles. And I'll talk about that next. So I just drew them on with a needle tool. You guys know this from Ceramics A. When you draw or write with your needle tool, you get all those little spurs, those little boogers that are really terrible. So I just kind of mapped it out with the needle tool. Now I'm going to take the pencil, and the pencil still displaces the clay. Like it still gives you spurs. See those little spurs that are roughed up, or boogers as I like to call them, spurs. But when they're bigger than like that, they're just a little bit easier to brush away too. Plus my line is more bold now. So if you're just going to do basic line work, just work on making those lines a little bit more bold and a little bit more clean. And that might mean going back and recarving those same lines a couple of times just to really clean them up and get all those boogers out of there. Now to make the holes, that's a good thing to do right away, because then you'll always know which side is up, so you'll know how your design needs to go. If your clay is still pretty pliable, you can take that pencil and you can kind of push through. I just kind of turned it back and forth, almost like it was a drill bit, and then push through from the other side too. And you'll get an exit wound, like it'll like break through and be real rough on one side. So just brush that or meld that roughness away, and then keep going back and kind of fixing it until it's nice and neat, until it's smooth. Don't just poke it through once and say that you're done. Like do it a couple times from both sides, make it nice and smooth, take a sponge to it, make it look good. And we do want it to be kind of a big hole, because the way we're gonna glaze this, if you were to fire it, is we're gonna actually hang these in the kiln. So we need to be able to hang these on a wire. So that hole needs to be big enough for the wire, but also big enough that the glaze doesn't fill it in. So a hole that's maybe slightly smaller than the circumference of a pencil is ideal. You could also use the handle of a paintbrush, because see how that is graduated. It's smaller and then it gets wider. So that's a good way to kind of gently widen that hole. Just kind of turn it back and forth and then do it from the other side too. So get your holes in there today before you go too far with your design work, so that you always know which side is up. So that's one way that you could do your carving. I also mentioned draw out your designs and decide if they're going to be puffy. So that, I don't know that there's a better word for it than that, but you know how you can have puffy letters, like block letters where the letters are actually fat? That's what I mean by puffy. So here's the same symbol that you just saw, the Aquarius symbol, but I actually made them more three-dimensional. I made them quote unquote puffy. So the way I did that is I took my needle tool and I drew the Aquarius symbol as though it was something that had more thickness to it, like a puffy letter or a block letter. So there's the first one right there. I basically outlined the shape. And now I would do the second one too, of course. I'll just do this first one for now for the purposes of speed. So now I could take my ribbon tool and carve the area around that puffy shape. So that way the puffy shape seems to be popping up higher than everything else around it. So it makes it a little bit more three-dimensional. And if I let my carving kind of just gently fade away as it goes away from that object, that way it isn't really even all that apparent that you carved it. It just looks like you have this shape that's raised up above everything else on the surface of your tile. So this is a way to get a little bit more sophistication into your relief tile. So this technically counts as a relief tile. It's just really shallow relief. This puffy method where you draw the shape and then carve around it is a way to get a little bit more dimension. And that, of course, would need to be smoothed and fine-tuned and all of that. But that's another way to do it puffy. I did my puppies, and I wish I could pass these around, but I don't think that that can happen during COVID. We probably shouldn't all touch the same thing. But these are the puppies that I made, and I tried to do the interior lines. And then I also did subtractive carving there. I tried to carve and like make the hip look like it was sticking out further than the belly, the ear look like it's sticking out further than the head. So I just tried to do some subtractive carving to make things pop out to different levels. So the back foot, I carved that to be lower than the front foot. So it looks like they're, you know, the way they would be in real life. So that kind of carving would be ideal. If you can carve the dimensions into the different areas of your design, great. I mentioned additive in your notes for today. That's another technique you could do. So here's my Aquarius sign again, but this time I rolled tiny little coils and then slipped and scored them onto my tile. So they're popping out, they're creating dimension. Again, the background's kind of boring. So I would definitely go in and maybe do a little bit of like watery kind of carving, like a flowing water kind of texture behind it. So it's more interesting to create those different layers of dimension. So I would do that same thing on the back side too. Whatever technique you choose, whether it's additive, whether it's subtractive with low relief or subtractive with higher relief, if you want to mix and match techniques, you absolutely can. Like I can do additive and do subtractive on the same tile. But whatever you do on the front, please do the same on the back so that as it turns, it's the same thing on both sides. Ideally, for the sake of cohesion, you would do the same technique on all your tiles, like all additive or all subtractive or, you know, all a combination on all tiles. But if you want to try the different techniques, it's fine if you want to do it that way too. But the best, like most professional looking wind chime would probably all have the same technique on all the tiles is what I would recommend. Even if you're combining techniques, combine your techniques then on all your tiles. So before you do any of this carving, one of the things that's going to be important to check is what stage are your tiles in. This one, like it still feels cold, so I know that there's still water in it. It's still kind of a darker color, so there's still water in it, but it's really... Hello, person who's unmuted. So I can't push a pencil through this. This is too dry for me to push the hole into it. I could carve this, but to drill the hole would be difficult. So that's where you would want to find a drill bit. I have this little tool right here that has a drill bit end to it. And I'm just going to put my finger on one side and I'm using my hand to turn the tool to drill the hole. And it's slow. Don't use the bit through so you can hang it. This is a little bit of a smaller hole, but if you have a bigger drill bit about the size of a pencil, that would be great. Another thing to think about, especially if you have a weird shape, like my puppy is kind of a weird shape, finding the center of balance. Like if this hangs now, is it going to hang level? When I did the hole on this puppy, I put it in its back and it wasn't in the center of balance. So when it hangs, he kind of tips forward. So I should have put the hole up at the head where it would have hung more straight up and down. So that's another thing to think about too. If you drill the hole and you kind of, you see how it hangs, and if you're not loving it, you can just fill in the hole and make a new one. And if your tiles are too dry, there are spray bottles over on that wedging table there. You can spray your tiles down and rehydrate them a little bit. It'll take some time for them to rehydrate. But like these ones that are too dry, I would probably spray those down and let them wait for a little bit before I do anything. Okay, so when you are finished getting however far you get for today, maybe you finish all your carving, maybe you just get half of yours carved, however far you get, take a progress picture that shows your slip and your carved tiles in the same shot. If you did both sides, it's fine, just show me your best side. I don't need to see both sides today. So a photo that shows the slip and the tiles in the same picture uploaded by 3 p.m. is what I'm looking for today. People who are here in person. Oh, sorry, I should also say this. It's a weekend, long weekend, right? Because we don't have school on Friday. So when you wrap these up for today, put a damp paper towel between the tiles and your board and then bag them up tight. So trap that moisture so they stay workable for Monday because we're finishing these on Monday. Okay, people at home, same. Damp paper towel on your tray, sealed up bag. Okay, people who are here, any questions that I can answer before I meet with the VLA kids? Yeah.
So the design has to be exactly the same?
Exactly the same or similar on both sides, but then if a different tile has a different design, that's fine. But ideally, like as this turns in the breeze, it would be nice if it was the same design or similar. Any other questions? Okay, so you folks get to work. VLA kids, stick around. I'm gonna not take up too much more of your time. I just want to touch base. So I'm gonna stop recording.
Ready.